Hey guys, we've decided to do this a little differently from now on, so without further ado, here's a history of NBA 2K. In 1999, 2K and Sega teamed up to create their own basketball game. It starred none other than the great Allen Iverson, and this was the start of great NBA games on the Sega Dreamcast. 2K came out of the gates really strong with amazing reviews across the board. In fact, this was one of the staples for showing off how amazing the graphical power and ahead of its time the Sega Dreamcast was. NBA 2K1, released in the year 2000, also had Allen Iverson on the cover and was also met with great esteem. In fact, it did everything that the original did in 1999, but just improved upon it. Sega and 2K decided to add playable outdoor blacktop courts such as Rucker Park in an attempt to add a more street ball feel to the game. While they didn't realize this would actually be the foundation for their further games, such as in 2K18 where you can play in the park, or at least a fictional park. 2K2 was critically acclaimed across the board, and it was a very monumental game, but not for its gameplay or innovation. It was monumental because it marked the end of Sega and 2K's relationship, not in that they refused to work together, but this was when 2K found its way onto PlayStation, onto Xbox, and quite frankly, the sales on those just beat Dreamcast, and there was no turning back at that point. 2K3 was the first game not to be published on the Dreamcast. In fact, this ushered in a new era of next-gen titles where only the Xbox, PlayStation, and GameCube saw a release. Sega still was a publisher, however, their system was no longer in the runnings. While they were still 2K Studios, they decided to make a deal with ESPN for more presentation's sake and changed the name from 2K just to ESPN Basketball. And this was a good thing considering it gave more name recognition and reviews were pretty much stellar, with one of the main issues being that the shoot and dunk buttons were the same, which is a staple of today's basketball, something we would have no issue with. But back in the day, these were all foundational and new steps and something that would eventually become the control scheme of the future. Interesting side note, this is the only 2K basketball game not to have 2K in the title, just ESPN Basketball, and they never repeated this again. After 5 years of nothing but Allen Iverson, 2K decided to replace him with Ben Wallace. Not only did they re-add 2K back into their title, replacing just ESPN Basketball, they added something that would eventually become monumental: creation of your own player. This was one of the first times you could do this in a sports game, and in fact, the first time in the 2K series that you could create your own basketball player. 2K6 was a really important game in the 2K lifespan. In fact, this was one of the games I most fondly remember when I was a kid. Not just because it had Shaquille O'Neal on the cover, but it turned out that this was the first game that had nothing to do with Sega. This was actually the first game published solely by 2K Sports. In fact, Shaquille O'Neal had an integral part to play in this game. The low post defense, the low post offense was all not only modeled on Shaquille O'Neal, he actually played an integral role in the development of it. He even gave his own opinions on how it should feel, how it should respond, what players would do in certain situations. Even though this game did not receive the same critical praise of the others, it still was a pretty big important step for the future of the whole 2K series. This was also the sports game of the next generation, where PS3 and Xbox 360 was graced by it. Now, the graphics didn't improve that much, but it was the first step to a big new improvement and big new standards in sports gaming. NBA 2K7 received favorable reviews while also having the great Shaquille O'Neal on the cover. However, this was a year that ratings started to decline. Not bad, but they weren't getting the outstanding acclaim of the previous games, and that's largely due to the lack of, well, what was seen as innovation and a severely lacking presentation system, mostly due to the withdrawal or absence of ESPN. There were some highlights this year, namely in the advancement of the player creation tool. Not only did they improve upon some of the previous ways to create your own NBA legend, they allowed you to take that player into the street and play against other legends and other players in the NBA at this time, and that was a big hit. To show a certain area of improvement that they've made in modern times is the music. For example, they only had 13 songs on this game compared to the 50 songs on 2K18. You can see why their presentation had plenty of issues. 2K8 received, again, marginal reviews, mostly favorable. However, it was obvious they were still holding on to pieces and fragments of the past. Most games had already advanced well into the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 at this point. However, 2K seemed that they wanted to continue to support the PlayStation 2, which is fine. However, the visuals in 2K8 suffered dramatically. In fact, most people found that the visuals in this game were well below average. Some people found that the animations were beautiful and stellar. However, holding on to the past was obviously holding 2K back. 2K9, now graced by Kevin Garnett, had huge improvements in lots of little areas, and that amounted to showing improvements across the board on their scores. Now, those minor improvements made a big difference later down the road because they added important things like living rosters, where the rosters that you would play with reflected the games in real life and who was on teams, who was being traded, how people were improving, and whether they were injured or not. And this added a real connection between gamers and the real life NBA. 2K10 is an important moment in the 2K series, probably the most important, not only to me personally, but to gamers across the world. In fact, the series today is based off of the decisions made in this game. They decided to introduce the iconic My Player mode, where you got to introduce yourself to the NBA, try out in the draft combine, and either make it or not into an NBA team. If you made it, you got to play with your favorites as Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. As yourself, you got to pick your own position, and this was a thing that would change the series for better forever. 2K realized they were onto something with the My Player mode, and in 2K11 they expanded on that with the My Player mode to having none other than the greatest of all time, Michael Jordan, as the protagonist, or as a protagonist if you wanted to play as him. Not only was he the cover athlete, but you could place him on whatever team you wanted, and he would change and grow in age and appearance as the seasons and the time would go on. There were also much needed improvements to the series in that the artificial intelligence and gameplay was improved upon, and while the game did receive good reviews, better than some of the last games, it still wasn't quite up to the original in terms of critic response. However, they established that they were willing to improve, and they were definitely going for the more cinematic storytelling, and taking the hint that players loved the experience of My Player and liked getting to have the emotional response in playing their games. 2K12 was the legend year. Not only could you play as Michael Jordan, but you could play as him in his greatest moments and relive his greatest achievements. In fact, this was the first year that they had not only Michael Jordan as the cover athlete, but some people believe the top 3 best players of all time in Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird. And you could choose whatever cover athlete you wanted and just switch him out. Say if you wanted a Magic Johnson, just go out and put him on your cover. 2K doubled down on their previous success with the My Player and also wanted to improve upon their legend status, or at least the legend theme. Not only did you have My Player mode, but you had Create a Legend, where you could pick someone, say Vince Carter or Kobe Bryant, go through their career from a rookie and live out as that legend. My favorite was picking Jeremy Lin right before he had his whole breakout season. In fact, that was one of my favorite parts, was to live that through myself and be that player. And it was fun, but it wouldn't last. It was something that they didn't continue with, and My Player would eventually dominate and engulf the entire series. 2K13, produced by Jay-Z, was an interesting step forward by having celebrity endorsement, and actually ended up having a lot of legend drama. While Scottie Pippen was originally left out of the game, and after fans were dismayed over the situation, they eventually put him back into the roster. However, the likes of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Julius Erving were left out of the game, sadly. Many consider this a golden age for the My Player and My Career players. Everyone was overpowered. There were no microtransaction issues. It was just make whatever obnoxiously amazing player you could and go out there and dominate with your friends. 2K14 was the first 2K game to come out on the Xbox One and PS4. It still had an Xbox 360 and PS3 release that ended up having a similar arc as to the Michael Jordan Legend system, where you could play through the legendary moments, or at that time legendary moments, of LeBron James. However, that wasn't something that made its way to the PS4 or the Xbox One versions. This was, however, the next step in graphics for sports games and would raise the bar to a completely new level. In fact, I think this is one of the best ones they've made, at least visual-wise. The biggest step forward, though, was adding a story to the My Player, adding the My Career to the My Career. This was where you would actually play as an up and coming NBA star, and you would have a friend, you would have drama, you would make decisions, and this drew people in. But the biggest advancement, besides the graphics and beside the story, was what became known as My Park. This is where different My players would go into one single area and have street ball duels on one another. And this was a huge step forward, which would actually become the backbone of their later games. 2K15 pushed the envelope even further, this time by putting more My in My Career and adding Pharrell Williams to curate the music. How they put in more My, though, was by doing something that had never been implemented in the game, at least successfully, and this was by allowing you to put your own face on your personal My Career player. Even though 2K15 got good reviews across the board from most mainstream critics, this was one of the first times we saw someone really take a dig. In fact, they received some scores in the low 60s for their accomplishments. NBA 2K16 was the start of some rocky fan reception. They had 3 amazing cover athletes in Steph Curry, Anthony Davis, and James Harden. However, that wasn't where the issues were. 2K16 seemed to have somewhat of a struggle to get by a 6 out of 10 on Steam. In fact, it had a lackluster performance on the computer in general. Aside from a 3-team cover athlete squad, they also had a 3-team musician squad in DJ Mustard, DJ Premier, and DJ Khaled. Despite this rule of 3s, they only had one director for the My Career mode, and that was Spike Lee, who is a famous basketball director. However, the storyline was not received all too well and considered cheesy and maybe a little bit childish. Despite a lackluster story and restrictive My Career, that was not the main issue with 2K16 in the fans' eyes. This was when the new business model introduced itself in a much more aggressive way, which was microtransactions, which would plague the series from then on. 2K17 is the next installment. However, nothing really interesting happened in this one. More of the same, more park gameplay, more face scanning. Nothing major happened, more microtransactions maybe. However, this was a relatively uneventful year. In fact, most people wondered what happened. Usually in each year there's been at least one minor step forward in an area that made improvement. However, this felt like almost a rehashing of the same game, just with some different presentation. My Career did receive a little bit of diversity in adding in certain play styles to enhance the overall feel and control over your character. There was My GM, which was another game mode which attempted to have the same storyline feel of My Career while being a manager, a GM of your own franchise, and maybe even eventually the owner. However, that never received the same fan service or even love that the My Career mode has garnered over the years. 2K18 is the most recent iteration in the 2K series, and the 19th installment as a whole, which means next year we'll be receiving the 20th installment, which is a pretty big deal for a franchise. As a whole, the game has received good reviews. However, the biggest issue and what has been the biggest taint in the series is the rampant microtransaction issue. However, the game has improved throughout the years and is looking much better, much more superior in terms of an objective standpoint than it did in the previous iterations. The foundational game mode for the series, My Career, has also received some interesting improvements this year, specifically to the My Park scenario, which is now My Neighborhood, where you can go shopping, see your friends buy new clothes, and as a whole, it's an expansion of the original park idea into more of a town. As a whole, the series has received massive improvements from 1999. As you can tell, the graphics are vastly superior, gameplay has improved dramatically, and original ideas have come and gone, but despite that, the overall growth of the series is obvious. The game may no longer be connected to Sega, the game may no longer have ESPN in the title. In fact, the game's presentation as a whole may still leave someone wanting. However, this game is certainly not one that disappoints, at least when you look past the microtransactions. But that's going to do it for this history of 2K from 1999 to 2018, almost 20 years. If you like how I did this and would like me to continue doing it this way, please let me know and leave a like. If you like it when I don't talk and just play through gameplay, let me know as well. If any of you want to help me get additional gameplay, that would be very much appreciated. I also have my personal channel in the bio link down below, whatever that's called. See if you'd like to see me personally, but I love doing these gameplay histories, and I love seeing your comments and your ideas, and whether you like this or not. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I hope you got to relive a piece of your past or learn something new. But again, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.